We're on the phone with Kenneth Thomas from Detroit. First of all, what would you describe your music as? What style would you call yourself?
It's definitely a trance kind of influenced sound, but coming up in Detroit and playing a lot of different venues around here that I do, and I have a lot of influences from a little bit of a techie sound. Also, there's quite a bit of a house sound, a house influence in there. But everything kind of focuses around trance. I've heard a lot of people describe it as integratable trance. So which is coming from Detroit, that's a pretty big compliment to have people in Detroit say that, because there isn't a big trance scene in Detroit to have people accept it and be into it is very cool. So
is that something you've always found yourself fighting against? Trying to distinguish yourself from the techno label?
Yeah, a little bit in the beginning. You get I kind of had to do my own thing, and there's definitely some politics involved, and it was definitely hard to get gigs early on, and basically I just had to make my own events and dig up my own nights and kind of just start doing my thing, and the people that were into it kind of came out of the woodwork, and then the people who maybe weren't exposed to it before were exposed to it and got into it. But it was definitely a little bit challenging in the beginning. There was a lot of weird vibes around town. There still is a little bit, but people are really coming with an open mind nowadays.
So how did you actually get into the scene then?
I had some friends out in California that I was visiting about 8 years ago, and at the time I was like totally into punk rock. I wasn't into electronic music at all, and these guys I was staying with were ravers, typical mid-'90s ravers from San Francisco. Anyways, they we were driving around and hanging out with them for the weekend or whatever, and they just kept playing Paul Oakenfold's Transport CD. And at the time I was just like, what is this? I don't get this music. They were getting all excited and they were all into it. And I didn't get anything out of it at all, really. I just thought it was kind of goofy. And then when I got home, I heard a track on a TV show playing in the background from that CD. It was Paul Van Dyke Words. And me being a fan of good, catchy melodies in music, in general, I heard that song and I was like, what, that is kind of a neat sound. So I did go out and buy the CD and actually gave it a couple of good listens, and I finally, I guess it clicked, and I understood it. And I bought a couple other, Oakenfold CDs, and I started buying the Global Underground series. And then, a year or so later, just decided that, this is something that I want to get my hands on. Picked up turntables and took it from there.
You mentioned that you indirectly got your start from the underground rave scene, warehouses, and so on. Is that scene still around on either side of the border?
I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit more prevalent in Toronto, but I think it's probably the same as U.S., and that is that it's pretty much dead. The rave scene is pretty much gone. I don't think it exists anymore. I think, I think it's a number of things that, and I mean, it's something that I necessarily, I'm not really into the rave scene. I never really supported it, actually. I never really went to a rave. The first rave I went to, I was actually DJing at. I started DJing on my own and just going to nightclubs. And I think what kind of brought it down was the very, very, heavy and prevalent drug usage, especially underage. You got 15, 16-year-old, kids that are just wrecked out on drugs and don't know how to really handle themselves. And that, of course, is going to, pique the interest of local law enforcement, whether it's in Canada or whether it's in the U.S. And of course, if you have something that's that blatant and that, outrageous, which was the drug usage in the rave scene in the 90s, in the U.S. and all across North America, you're going to get a crackdown by the law. And I think in a way, a lot of people think it's a bad thing, but I kind of think it might be a good thing because, it makes the music, it takes the music to a venue that caters to a little bit older, crowd. We're talking 18, 19, 20, 21, even up towards like 25, 26, 27. And that crowd, even though there still is some drug usage and whatnot, it's a more mature crowd. They know how to handle themselves a little bit better. And, you're not going to have as many blatant overdoses and as much reckless usage, which is safer for everybody,
Have you seen any horror stories of late in the clubs about that?
No, actually not really. I was thinking about this the other day, and I haven't heard about a massive overdose or somebody dying in a club in years. We had a couple incidences in Detroit back in the late '90s, and honestly, I haven't. And I have seen the drug usage has diminished so much over the last couple of years. It's almost just hidden now. It's just people do it on the side, and it's more of like not a the scene doesn't focus around it. I used to, in the rave scene, it was like the music was just an accent to the drugs and everything. The light shows, the glow sticks, the clothing, everything was just an accent to amplify the drug experience, where now it's more focusing on the art, which is the music, and the drugs, if people use them, if they don't use them, if they drink, if they're sober, whatever, but it's all just, it's not focusing on that, it's just an addition to the scene. So, but the focus is becoming on the music, and you can see that by the music having more integrity, more substance. Back in the 90s, you had a lot of music that really was just focused, again, just on hard beats and kind of, cookie cutter kind of structure, just to get the kids off. But now you're seeing a lot more mature sounding, a lot more integrable sounding music coming out, which is exciting for the artists in the industry.
On that note, do you think it's the DJs doing, or is there something else in society that has changed that usage?
From which perspective? From what do you mean?
Like, do you think it's the fact that maybe the DJs have done something with, decided, well, this isn't right indirectly, and that maybe their style of music or the way that they play it or just the actual music itself has changed drug usage? Or is it just something in society, like those people that have gone out are more mature?
I think what changed the drug usage was more just literally the law cracking down and making it harder for raves to happen, and there's no underground, there's not a big illegal rave scene for these kids to congregate and do their thing, and it's moving on to the clubs. I don't think the DJs really have anything to do with that aspect. I mean, everybody that I know, from the producers to DJs, they just produce what they like. Whether it's happy hardcore, those guys liked that sound, so they were producing it. And then you've got Sasha and Digweed and these guys who have always been on a slightly more progressive, more a little bit deeper perspective to things. And everybody is always just on their natural progression of finding their sound and pinpointing their sound and going in the direction they're feeling at that time. DJs are always just doing what they are feeling as artists. The way it's influenced, though, is that now that there isn't a big drug scene, and not to discount like happy hardcore or a lot of the hardcore scene or anything like that, but that sound was, a lot of the people that were on drugs were very attracted to that sound. It was a very hard sound. It was a very, if you're sober, it's very hard to dance for more than 10, 15 minutes to anything that's over 138 BPM, 140 BPM. It's very tough. I mean, especially when you're, with hardcore stuff that you're getting up to like 150, 155, you basically have to be on drugs to dance for more than, a few minutes to that stuff. And now that the drug scene isn't there as much, you see a focus, going away from that sound just because there isn't a market for it. When there isn't a market of people who have that kind of energy to go for 5 hours to insanely hard, intense music, you'll see that market diminish. If I'm making sense. So I think it's just it's a balance of everything, of culture, of the crowd, and the DJs and the artists are always just going to do what they want to do. They're always going to produce the sounds that they're feeling, that they're into.
Yeah, well, you produce. Your latest track, Preen, was just signed to Armada. What's going on with this track?
It's a co-production between myself and Elevation. Elevation is Mike Targansky. He's already well established in the progressive trance realm. He's done a few productions under the Marcus Schultz Presents Elevation guise. His biggest track was Clear Blue. I mean, that was one of the biggest progressive trance anthems, of last year. I mean, you had everybody from Sasha and Max Graham to Oakenfold and Armin van Buuren playing it. So everybody across the spectrum of trance and progressive was playing that track. He actually lives in Detroit, and me and him hooked up, and he's actually a 17-year-old kid, and we just, we hit it off and started throwing some beats around. And Preen actually was our first co-production together. We finished it, and Marcus really got behind it, and he started supporting it on his radio show, Global DJ Broadcast. Originally Armada was not that interested in it, to tell you the truth. And then from the buzz that we started getting from, Nick Warren got a hold of it and was playing it. Oakenfold, he said, quote, we heard from a number of people that it's his biggest track from last summer, that he just is floored with it. He got Pete Tong playing it from Radio 1, and eventually Armada came around and they picked it up for their Electronic Elements, progressive label. And it just hit the stores about a week and a half ago. From what I hear, it's their biggest selling record. It's already sold out of the first pressing. They're on the second pressing, so that's definitely very exciting. Elevation's been there. He's already had a massive hit out there, but for me to have my hands in something like that is really exciting personally for me. So.
You mentioned 17. There seems to be quite a market for these younger producers and DJs. Do you see this affecting the scene? Because most of these DJs can't even get into the clubs.
Yeah, it's funny, it's true, he had a track, Mike had a track on Armin's label, and one of the biggest records of last year, and yet he had never even seen a DJ live in a club, which is crazy, until he met me, and I started bringing him out, and, getting him into places, but it's going to influence. I don't know how much it's going to influence. I mean, you already see some of the influence on, the internet radio shows and the kind of the crowd that follows, all these different shows, and kind of the internet crew. If you go on the internet and you start talking to people, around the Global DJ Broadcast and the State of Trance forums and stuff, you got a lot of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old producers and DJs, and it is if you look from that perspective. I don't know in the actual real world what's going on. I mean, you get a lot of these guys that have radio shows that put on these amazing 3-hour radio shows every week that are just fantastic. The mixing's great, the programming's great, yet they've never, played a gig in their life. So it's definitely, it takes, when you balance in the younger crowd, you're kind of bringing in a non-club mentality, and it kind of creates a market outside of the clubs. So you don't just have people buying CDs and buying records that are, club goers and actual club DJs. Now you've got people who just listen to music in their rooms, in their cars, in their headphones, on their computer, and just, so it is creating a bit of a subculture outside of the clubs. We'll see. It's still a new thing with this new trend of young DJs and young producers, being in mass like they are today. We'll see what happens in the next, 4 or 5 years and see where it goes from there. I mean, who knows? It could be the next, pop music, so to speak.
When I was talking to Max Graham, he mentioned that it seems as it's a necessity to have your own radio show. You have your own on Transfer. And do you think it's something that you have to do now?
No, I don't think it's something you have to do. It might be something you have to do in the future. Again, like I said, there's a whole market, coming up in the internet realm. It definitely helped me. I was doing my thing, and I was already, doing DJ gigs across America before I was plugged into the internet scene. But, getting plugged in earlier this year to Transfer and launching the show Sessions has really helped, build a little bit more notoriety across the world, because I have fans in Norway. I have fans in the UK, and so people that I talk to now on a regular basis through Instant Messenger or whatever, I talk to them almost on a daily basis that are, 3,000 miles away or just, across the world. It definitely opens up a new spectrum, a new way to reach people. In the future, it could be a necessity. Right now, I don't see it as a necessity, but it definitely helps, and it also lets you expand, what you play. It definitely influences my sets. Allows me a chance to experiment and play a little bit deeper music that I wouldn't necessarily be able to play in a club to a lot of people. So it's definitely a unique tool. I don't know if it's a necessity yet, but I think it might be going that direction.
Toronto is one of the hot spots you seem to hit often, just down the road, obviously. You're pretty much a resident at System, and you had a chance to play at the Gov a few weeks back. What do you think's the difference between the two?
Between System and the Gov, or Detroit and Toronto? Well, the government System I equate to like a club in Detroit. We have Blue here, and we do regular shows, probably 3 or 4 shows a month that are doing 700-800 people, and bringing in some of the biggest DJs in the world, from Tiesto to Armin, and we have Marco V on Saturday coming up, and System is very much like Blue or like Motor used to be in Detroit. It's like a regular club. It's a great club, and you're doing 600, 700, 800 people for a headliner, and it's fantastic. And I mean, it's down to earth. It's like you're going to the club. If you lose your friend, you can find them. 10 minutes later, it's like a normal club. Then you step into the government, and the government is like what you imagine the super clubs in the UK being like, or the mega clubs in Ibiza, or it's massive. I mean, if you lose your friends there, you might never see them again for the entire night. I mean, you're talking 4,000 people when they've got or more when they've got Cool House open. I mean, it's definitely it brings the term massive to mind. I mean, it's fantastic to be able to play a venue like that. Was just great. I haven't stepped into an arena that big until that night, so it was definitely a change of pace. And it's definitely more energy. You can play it a lot harder and still rock the crowd out, because you've got, instead of 800 people or 600 people, you got over 2,000 in front of you in one room. I would equate it to being the difference between them being like System is just like an intimate, normal nightclub, where the government is like a mega club.
Are there any clubs in North America or around the world that, if you had the chance to tell a DJ or just a party goer, look, go, you need to go there at least one time in your life?
I would say if you're from America, you'd have to go to the government, because there's nothing really like that in America. There's some big clubs in America, but not like the government. So going to the government at least once, definitely. As far as great clubs in America, I would suggest one of my favorite venues is Spun Day in Chicago. Vision, which I think now it's God's Kitchen. I'm not sure if the Spun Day God's Kitchen thing is still confusing me, but they're merged. And so the Spun Day God's Kitchen in Chicago is definitely one of my favorite venues. I would suggest anybody that's in that area to go check it out, because the lighting, the sound, just the layout of the venue. Again, it's not a mega club. Capacity is probably 1,500 or less. But it's such a fantastic room, especially if you go for like a big DJ when they've got all their displays up and everything. I would say Vision in Chicago on a Saturday night when it's Spun Day God's Kitchen would be fantastic to check out.
Now, in the next few weeks, where are you off to?
Let's see. This Saturday we've got we're doing a show with Marco V at Blue. Next week is Thanksgiving weekend. We've got Oakenfold on Wednesday. James Zabeel is at Blue on Thursday. I'm not playing that show, but I'll definitely be there. Darude, I'm doing a show with Darude Vila. He's a very good friend of mine. He's coming to town. He's actually coming to Cleveland, going down there to play with him. Then we've got, I'm off to St. Louis in a couple weeks. I've got a residency that I do monthly in Detroit called Snap. PictureThisDetroit.com puts that on, so it's always a great time. We've got that in a couple weeks. What else? We've got some other stuff coming up. I don't know. That looks like the next couple weeks. I think I've got another. I'll be back at System on a Friday in January. We haven't secured the date yet, but it's looking like January. So, and then I've got my normal gigs around Detroit and stuff.
And you can always check out your website for up-to-date list, correct?
Yep, DJKennethThomas.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
No problem. It's great.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Look to seeing you back at System when you come.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. This is Kenneth Thomas, and you are listening to Amplified Radio. This is Kenneth Thomas, and you're listening to my latest track on Amplified Radio.